Hey everyone, it's Sam. I'm coming to you now from my living room. You got to see my basement yesterday, or whatever day it is. It doesn't matter anymore. I wanted to introduce you to a friend of mine who is a land manager at a property that includes a farm. And this is actually the property in Virginia, the farm at Sunnyside, that I talk about all the time. I used to be the land manager there, which we call the conservation manager. And Mike has taken over. He's been there for a few years. We're going to talk to him today about what he does as a conservation manager for a very large estate, which includes an organic farm, some of the challenges of the job, and how he works his skills as a former ESF student into this position. Mike, you want to show yourself?
Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Forgive my Syracuse hoodie not being ESF.
Yeah, fantastic. So,
Yeah.
Mike, before we begin, and you're going to share your screen in a minute and show some pictures of your work and the property. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm going to use this time to go downstairs and get my list of questions that I forgot. So I will be right back.
Perfect. Yeah, so like Sam said, my name's Mike. I am the conservation manager here at the farm at Sunnyside. I'm going on my fourth year. Yes, fourth year. So I went to ESF with Sam. I studied forest resource management, so this type of work is right up my alley. I pretty much spend most of my time here on a variety of projects in the conservation program, mostly involving invasive species management and improving access for the landowner and for management activities, really. But yeah, I'm happy to be here to talk about some things. I guess I can share my screen and show you.
Yeah, switch on over.
Show you some of the photos and things from the farm. Some of the things we've been working on here. Can you see the screen or?
Nope, you screwed it up.
Oh, well, let me try and. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so, oh, there we go. Okay, cool.
All right.
All right, now while you're struggling and about to show some pictures, perfect. So a lot of people don't really know what land management is. It's kind of a big thing. So as you talk about some of these first pictures, also explain like what do you even do all day? What's the typical day or week or season or year for someone like you?
Right. So most of my work is field work. The vast majority, 90-95% of my work is in the field. So we have about 420 acres or so on this main property. About 25, 30 of it is in agriculture. As you can see on this photo, this is one of our main agriculture areas. So what I do is I manage all of the surrounding land, all the land that is not in agriculture production. So like on this photo, you can see the agriculture field, but you can also see on the sides of it, there are more wild areas that I manage. So this is a good shot because you can kind of see some of the different corridors that we work on to essentially provide safe passage of wildlife through the property to kind of limit the negative interactions between wildlife and humans while they're farming.
So could that be stuff like, I don't know, bobcats eating the chickens, or even pests or potential issues like animals getting their waste on farm foods?
Yeah, providing areas where they can go, like the geese. Some of the geese are still going to go into some of the fields. There's nothing we can do about that. But if we can offer them more attractive places to go, they can go there.
These are Canada geese.
Yes.
Yeah, huge problem for every land manager with water features.
Right. But yeah, also things like, deer and bear. You can see this. I don't know if you can tell, there's a pretty expansive deer fence along this ag field that we use to keep the deer out. But yeah,
Great.
go ahead.
So,
Let me see what else I got in this.
yeah, oh no, keep
It's
going,
just,
keep going. Yeah.
yeah, it's just another. These are all cool drone shots that the landowner got with his fancy drone. And here's looking back up to the north on that same field. You can see the mountains in the background. That's our property goes about halfway up those mountains there, and then it's the Shenandoah National Park. So we do share a border with a wilderness area. Um, so that gives us an extra incentive to kind of be, uh, proactive in our conservation management. So we can kind of extend the wild areas through the human impacted areas with these corridors. Um, Here's just a shot of one of the hoop houses. So,
Ooh, that's one of your meadows, isn't it?
I'm trying to figure out which. Yes, this is the new orchard meadow.
Yeah, so both
So a
Mike
big
and I
part of
have
what we
made
do.
meadows here. I think I still have the most acreage, but he's catching up.
Yeah, this was a 15-acre uh, chunk, so that took a pretty good chunk out of your. I think I'm at. What am I at? I don't know. I'm probably around 20 or so. So, but mine are better.
Uh,
Um, it's okay. You screwed up the first couple because you didn't know how to do it.
what do you?
Um,
That isn't true.
well, let's just say we've fine-tuned how to establish meadows over the years. As Sam did this for a number of years, and then I continued off of what worked for them and what didn't work. We've been able to really fine-tune. So a lot of these meadows, we have about 50 acres of meadow right now on the farm, and all of it at one point used to be orchard, and we've gone ahead. Some of the orchards were removed, I believe, prior to the current landowner purchasing the land, but we've also done a lot of work removing old, unproductive orchard that was too difficult to manage. There wasn't a market. It was too difficult for them to manage an organic orchard, and I guess there just maybe wasn't the market for having that large of an orchard. And plus, they all had Sam? They all had invasive species growing up all through them.
Yeah,
So
so many of our orchards hadn't been managed, like mowed consistently, so they had some of the worst invasive species that we dealt with in the meadows, like Johnson grass. It's a grass that's introduced for cattle, and they were a source of weeds for all of our conservation areas. But yeah, I like how you explained that so much of this habitat management is an economic decision. It's we actively choose areas that were not productive and had a recurring cost, and then converted them to habitat. Ooh, that's a nice one.
right.
So that's a very
So
young
yeah, the
looking
idea.
meadow.
Yeah, this is 1 year after seeding. So, and I believe this. Yeah, this was also 1 year after. No, this was actually no. These are in their second year. The idea, yeah, the economic decision with establishing these meadows is the idea that they should be uh, relatively cost effective to manage as opposed to a massive orchard. The idea is it does require a number of years of preparation of treatments and killing undesirable species and depleting the seed bank. So you do have to have patience with establishing these meadows, but they obviously offer a great deal of habitat for a wide range of species, from insects and pollinators up to songbirds and other small mammals and things of that nature. More meadow pictures.
Oh, you got some liatris going there.
Yeah. So here's a good shot of one of our corridors that Sam really did a lot of work on before I got here. You can see it's kind of inside the deer fence here. Can you see my cursor or
I
no?
can. And it's kind of ironic that to establish some of these corridors for wildlife movement, we have to prevent wildlife from entering them for a number of years first. So
Right.
Before any of you realize that, we want to point out we know that.
Right. So, right. The idea is you can see all these, various red osiers, and there's some oaks in there. There's all sorts of different species that we just add to every year in here. I believe when you started here, Sam, that this whole drainage was just what, honeysuckle and
It was
just a bunch of invasive species, right?
fescue field covered in Japanese honeysuckle. The
Right.
vine honeysuckle we get very little of up in New York.
Right. So, yeah, so this was a targeted area. Riparian areas are generally a high value area. So it's one of the areas that you all started with your management. And I assume you treated the invasives for a while, and we've just been adding new plantings to this every year. And we're starting to extend up the riparian corridor, or I guess it goes up this way. And we're kind of widening it with shrubbery and adding structure to it as we go, as the years go by. So right now it's really beneficial for songbirds, which is one of the more target animal classes, I guess, that we manage for here.
And I would say that the reason you do that, I mean, for one, it's like, yeah, some pest control from the songbirds that eat bugs, but also a lot of this is landowner objectives.
Right.
And the property owner, Nick Lapham, really likes birds.
He does.
He focuses on birds, and he is a world-renowned birder. So, by the way, with that that shrubland, I just want to point out too, it's not just habitat, it's also that drainage feeds one of the major irrigation pond systems on the property for the farm.
Right.
So it could help stabilize soil. Well, it definitely does help stabilize soil compared to just the grass coverage that it had before.
Right.
And there may be other benefits like carbon sequestration, but we don't actively quantify that stuff, or at least I didn't. Maybe you are.
No, I mean, I do continue the water sample. You did set up a water sampling monitoring program that we would do every month, but as I discussed with you a few months ago, all the numbers kind of held pretty steady for quite some time now. So we're kind of dialing back the monitoring to be, more quarterly instead of every month.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that feeds into our relationship with the ag program and making sure they have the quality water that they need to irrigate the fields. And I take things into account, like where I do my treatments. I do have to use herbicides for a lot of my work, but I use them in accordance with the regulations and the labels, and they're a very, very, very effective tool for what we do here. But I obviously have to keep in mind to keep my distance from the ag fields, because we are a certified organic farm. So obviously I can't be spraying in and around the agriculture areas, but the rest of the property is essentially open to herbicide use for the most part.
Actually, a good question. I often find that I have to defend herbicides as a land management tool.
Right.
Could you accomplish all the work you do on hundreds of acres without using herbicide? Or what would you have to do to replace using herbicide if you couldn't use them?
That's a big question. I'm involved in a focus group, I guess you'd call it now, with a bunch of land managers who do meadow establishment for various agencies and landowners. And we're trying to come up with that right now. It's essentially a meadow best management practices group. And there is, some of the members are part of nonprofit organizations that work with landowners to educate them on how to use their land to benefit wildlife more. And a lot of them are opposed to using herbicides because, they hear in the news, oh, glyphosate will give you cancer and it harms the environment and yada, yada, yada. But, the first part of that is, I think, education on herbicides and their use, and when they're used, to let people know that when you use them correctly, they are a very effective tool. But there are ways around using herbicide. on smaller scale. So, I know you asked larger scale, hundreds of acres. I'm not aware. I mean, you can't do the organic treatments on a larger scale like that and have success.
Unless you have
Now
like
there
an
might,
army of people, right?
well, sure, unless you have, unless you have a ton of resources and, a large crew of people.
Big machines too.
Sure, right. So it's even, I mean, I'm not even sure what the machines would do.
Yeah, so one thing we talked about in class is to prepare a meadow. And so, Mike, I'm talking about the sloped meadow. Um,
Right.
you can scour the soil, scour the top, 8 or whatever inches of topsoil that contains the seed bank, leaving a clean mineral soil substrate to plant seeds in of these native species that thrive. But if you talk about erosion problems and, you need to have an operator who can do that. And, luckily, so you can talk about this whenever, but Mike is an operator of these big machines, large engines, small engines. So that's a critical skill to have for managing a large area, unless you want to spend tons of money hiring out to do that work. Nice kitty, by the way.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's Chunks.
Oh, hey, Chunks, you seem to be losing weight finally.
Yeah. I'm waiting for this picture to load. It seems to be taking a minute. Do you see anything?
It's
No.
loading.
So,
Yeah, it'll just take a bit.
right, I was going to show you some of the erosion issues we had on that.
Mm. Oh, I know where that is. That's that 9-bark clump.
Right. So this is a terrible photo, but this is the only one I could find. So this is a meadow that Sam was talking about, where they stripped the top 8 inches of soil with all the seed bank of all the invasive seeds in them. But yeah, we did have some erosion issues for a number of years where we had to go in and add soil. We had to kind of grade the slope. You can't really tell, but this is a pretty steep slope here. And
I
then we had
will add part of the reason we had to do all that because the erosion is out of nowhere after we seeded this meadow. Just a few days after we put all the, thousands of dollars of seed in, we got a 2.5 or 3-inch rainstorm. So that's what started this whole problem. These problems would have been in place regardless, but that really made things challenging from the get-go.
Right. So over the course of 3 or 4 years, we've been able to stabilize that slope through pretty aggressive erosion control measures, like putting down these mats and reseeding. And I've been overseeding this meadow a little bit each year to kind of just fill in the gaps. But yeah, let me move back to this other meadow stuff real quick. So I do spend a lot of time with the meadows. It's a big part of what we do here. And they're not maintenance free, they're not management free. So I know I said before, we try to find cost effective ways to use the land, and establishing these meadows is one of our techniques. So, but they do require maintenance. We use controlled burns like this one. Sam, I think you were a part of this one.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Right.
Fun stuff happened.
Right. In fact, this isn't even a meadow that we seeded. This is one of the corridors. So not the best example, but is this the tall grass meadow?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here's a meadow burning during the growing season. And, the burning is an effective tool to kind of,
Well,
what would you say, Sam? Kind of I have a hard time explaining this, to kind of get rid of the duff on the ground and allow more diverse shrubs or more diverse forbs and grasses to come through, so it doesn't get all taken over by one species.
It'll also control succession by woodies like that locust.
Right.
Right. Yeah, naturally these systems evolved with fire. Think of lightning strikes or native peoples intentionally setting them on fire. So they are adapted to being burned every 3-5 years.
Right. So one of my biggest things that I'm working on with this meadow group that I mentioned before is really trying to fine tune the maintenance schedule, like uh, when exactly to burn, by looking at the meadow and doing a survey through it and seeing how it's growing, and maybe not necessarily just doing. It's probably easiest just to put each meadow on a schedule, like every 3 years you burn it, or you bush hog it, or you disc it, or something like that. Um, and that would work for larger tracts of land. But I think what we're going to do here is really try and observe the meadow and watch its composition change and decide what to do when accordingly. I guess if that makes any sense. But
Yeah, adaptive management.
yeah, there you go. But I understand on larger scale places, it's probably easiest just to have a 3-year cycle for maintenance. And obviously, you don't want to do everything on the same year. You want to stagger it, have different life stage cycles. This is something we've also done and are continuing to look to do as we bring in cattle for mob grazing. It's just another form of disturbing the meadow.
Kind of replaces bison or buffalo.
Yeah. Forests, we have quite a bit of forest on the property, on those hills behind the farm, that we don't do a lot of management in. We kind of stick to the forest that's closer to the meadows further down on the property, because they were historically more impacted by livestock and other human activities. So those are the areas that don't look as great. Let's just say that there's a lot more invasive species, and we have a lot of emerald ash borer damage in certain pockets that we've been working pretty diligently to do something about. We have some areas where white ash makes up almost 80% of the upper canopy, and some of those pockets we've gone in and we've just removed all those trees. It was extremely expensive, but we had previously invested in the understory there, and we wanted to protect the investments of all the work we had done. So we had to bring in a crew to very carefully take down a lot of ash trees. So birds, owls. We have a lot of nest boxes. Nest boxes allow us to kind of monitor the success of all of our.
Have you been banding barn owls now?
Yeah.
Right.
Every year in the silo, we have this box in the silo. We have an old silo that has a pair of barn owls in it. And every year, we believe they're the same pair that come back, or it could be the children of one of the pairs. But they're pretty much there almost year round, and they raise about 3 or 4 chicks every year, and we always band the chicks.
You still banding kestrels too?
Yep.
Hey.
We have about what do we have? 5 boxes on this property, and then a couple other neighboring properties. We have a couple boxes we monitor also. Last year was a down year for whatever reason.
So
go ahead.
This is really important because we talk a lot about land management, but what's so critical to this is the actual monitoring. How do you assess whether or not the changes you have made are having the intended effect? And
Right.
supporting bird populations at higher levels is one of those elements. You create habitat for them and also artificial habitat like these boxes. So that's great to see. The monitoring is critical.
Right. So I've continued some of the monitoring that you set up. I guess this is where I can go into kind of the differences between how the job has changed.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, you bring so many different skills. So how have you made the job your own since you started?
Right. So just to not forget about the monitoring aspect, I have continued. Sam did set up a handful of crucial monitoring programs that I've continued. Um, things like bird nest monitoring, streams sampling for salamanders and water quality, tick surveys, which I've kind of stopped doing. Sam, sorry about that.
Oh no, just give up. They're gonna take over.
Yeah, I know. Um, a few other things that I can't remember at the moment, but um, when Sam got here, again, I don't want to speak for you necessarily, Sam, but you focused a lot on research and getting baseline data for how the property existed, prior to all this management, and then in the early years of all the management activity. Did a ton of research, a bunch of field work, but also, you hired contractors to come in and complete some of the larger tasks, whether it was installing new vernal pools with machinery, or conducting burns, or doing larger scale invasive treatments, spot spraying and things like that, just because you didn't have the time to do it with your research. So what I've done coming in here is my background isn't really in research. It's in field work. It's managing crews and project management on somewhat large scales. So, before I was here, I did a lot of work with the conservation corps, where we partnered with national parks and other land management agencies to complete invasive species removal and treatment projects, and things like sustainable trail design and development. So I brought in those strengths here to really ramp up the treatments, purchasing more powerful equipment that I could do, that I could use for larger scale projects. I do have experience with heavier machinery, so I'm able to do a lot of erosion control projects and trail building on my own, and we don't have to contract that out.
So
So we can
we've said heavy machinery a few times. People might not know what that means.
Oh, sure. Not ultra mega heavy machinery, not like big bulldozers or anything like that, but excavators, little backhoes, skid steers, like little bobcat things that just allow me to move material around the farm and just do things in a more efficient manner than if you were to just do them by hand.
Mm-hmm.
It really opens up possibilities. So yeah, I focus on a lot of field work. So I don't, and it's not to say we don't do research here still, we still do, but I kind of outsource that to people that are more, it's their wheelhouse. It's not my thing per se.
It's actually almost like
myself.
I kind of had to outsource people that had huge crews to do
Right.
fires, which I didn't have the people for. And, it seems like you can do all that stuff, but some of the stuff you outsource is this scientific coordination, because you have access to the Smithsonian and all these universities down there.
Right. You did a lot of legwork making those connections, and I just kind of.
And they stuck with you? Wow.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
After what I did?
Right. So I just piggybacked off of your connections. And so, for example, this was a native bee survey where they installed these bumblebee hives in our meadows. So they picked a warm season grass meadow, and then they picked a fallow field, a field that hadn't been managed. So it has a lot of invasive species in it, things like fescue and lespedeza, and nothing really that great. Not many flowering plants that are useful, we thought, to bumblebees. And what they were doing is they wanted to compare the the pollen stores that these bees brought back to the hives. Um, and they were doing this across, I think, 14 different properties. This was in partnership with Virginia Working Landscapes.
Oh, so is that Ty Ralston? So I guess also
Yes.
Brandy Arboretum. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandy Experimental Farm. And one of the local universities, I don't remember which one, if it was UVA or Virginia Tech, was also involved in this. But they left these hives out in the meadows, and they would come back every couple of weeks, and they would capture bees as they entered the hives, and then take the little pollen sacs off of the bee, put them in a little vial, and bring them back to the lab to identify where the pollen came from. And they would come at different times of the day to see, they did a pretty expansive study where they're able to kind of see what the bees were doing at certain times of the day and at certain times of the year. So it was pretty fascinating to find, and they shared their data with us.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be a multi-year project, but the second year they had a lot of issues with the hives surviving, bears and other things that kept happening.
Do you have any initial findings from that you could tell us about?
Not handy, unfortunately,
Okay.
but what is that? The biggest takeaway was in the fallow field. They really liked the mullein.
Yeah.
And also that, I forgot the name of that purple flower that is in the pond.
Pickerel weed.
Pickerel weed, that's it. That was something that really shocked us that they absolutely loved. So we're actually, because of this data and because we learned that, we are now expanding that pickerel weed population throughout the property on other ponds. So I just took some cuttings from that house pond and I installed them in a couple of the other ponds to try and get them spread out in those ponds as well.
That
so
awesome.
Yeah. And we've done other research projects. We're also working with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute on a coyote tracking program. It's in the first stages where they're testing it out on their property first, and then they're going to expand it to partnering private landowner properties, for which we will be one. So they're going to trap and collar coyotes and track their movements out here, which is something that our landowner is very interested in. Yeah, this is just more of that project. Yeah.
Very cool. I got more questions, but if you're still rolling on this idea, go for it.
No, I'm good.
Oh,
go
cool.
ahead. I'm done with this one.
No, so what I wanted to reiterate is the importance of actually quantifying all this stuff. You do need to measure. And that's the difference between kind of just land management for the sake of doing it and actually assessing its value to wildlife and biodiversity. So this is what's great about the work that we do at the farm, or that I did a while ago and that Mike now does at the farm at Sunnyside.
Right.
Yeah. So I see you brought a picture up, but I'm curious about all the work you do. You do quite a bit of different things, from trail management and forest to erosion control to meadow management. What are some of the things that you are most proud of that you've done at this property over the years?
Most proud of is probably expanding access throughout the property, I guess. I'm very proud of that for some reason.
So you mean like building all these really cool trails and bridges and things?
Yeah, so it not only, it offers me access for management. I can bring in, little four-wheelers and other equipment into the far reaches of the property now, as opposed to before. And it just makes my job so much easier for whatever project we happen to have going on, in whatever part of the property. So yeah, we've expanded the trail system. So it's a big chunk of my career has been building sustainable trails for national parks, national forests, and other agencies. So it's kind of my wheelhouse, and I think it's one of the reasons I was brought into this position to kind of work on the infrastructure. Whoa, is my head going crazy? And you're
You were for a second, but
no,
you're better now.
yeah, that was funny looking. Um, so you know, something I worked on was kind of fixing up a lot of the trails where they were damaged or had poor alignments, or they had erosion problems, which can, if you have a bad trail that is all filled with water and mud, you're going to have people walking around and people driving around these holes and puddles, and further uh, expanding the footprint, I guess, of the corridor, and not protecting the resources. So if you build a trail correctly that sheds water correctly and doesn't erode, you can have sustained access without worrying about damaging surrounding resources of the land. So, doing things like stream crossings where I build bridges instead of driving through them with the little Kubota that I use that you saw there. This thing up here is what I use almost every day for accessing the property. It's a little side-by-side piece of equipment, and I'm just building these trails. And what?
I missed that thing.
Yeah, I can't believe it's still alive. I really, really beat that thing up. I'm just waiting to be given this one, and Nick just needs to get a new one. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, when he did do it before you got there, when he forgot to put the parking brake on and it rolled into a tree, the
yeah,
tree
well,
won.
yeah. I mean, you don't even want to look at the tailgate and the back box of that thing right now. It's completely messed up. So I build these nice bridges across these stream corridors, again, just to provide, I can now access other parts of the property and treat invasive species. We can get eyes on that part of the property and just kind of get a better idea of what's going on throughout the entire property to kind of have a more holistic approach to our management techniques. Install a lot of these erosion mat things that keep soil in place and vegetation growing. There's that thing I showed you before. I've also taken it upon myself to kind of repair all the farm roads. I'm really into soil erosion. It's kind of my thing. So I've done a lot of work with the farm road ditches and things that probably don't excite people, but they excite me.
There is at least one student in one of my classes who's really into soil erosion. So I'm sure one person is very excited about the work you've done.
All right.
How many miles of erosion mat do you think we've gone through at this property?
I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to.
Well,
Couldn't even
how
begin
about
to.
this? Do you know off the top of your head, and we'll share them later, but off the top of your head, any soil erosion guideline resources for people to look into, like I don't know, Conservation Corps websites or something?
I believe. I mean, when I went to ESF, they handed us a booklet that was soil erosion BMPs. And I don't know. I think that was through the New York State DEC, but I'm not sure. It was a little booklet. It gave all this information, like you have to have certain, based on the watershed and the slope, grade and aspect, you have to have a certain size culvert, like diameter and length and all this stuff. There's all these parameters that you're supposed to follow. But I think you should check your local guidelines for that.
It's always fun to like find out what people are oddly fascinated by.
Yeah, we got that. I also do a bunch of honeybee management, which,
I miss the bees so much.
yeah, it's probably my favorite part of the job, but I didn't really provide any pictures for that. So it's,
They've seen bees before.
right. That's fun. What else you got, Sam?
Well, no, that's been great. I wanted to ask you just a couple wrap-up questions. And it's kind of the same questions. So Do you have any advice for students who are interested in becoming a land manager? And part of that question is, you talked about it a little bit, but what are the skills that you've learned either in jobs or just like, being a person who's traveled the country doing different things? What are the skills that you found have been the most important to being in the role that you're in now? And what are some of the things you've realized that you need to learn on the job? Like we were talking about GIS earlier.
Right. Well, yeah, GIS in particular is something that, I took a couple courses in college, but never really had the opportunity to practically use my GIS skills in any position I've had so far. This position, being a land manager, though, it would be very beneficial to be well versed. And I'm, finding myself probably needing to take some refresher courses on GIS, because right now I just use Google Earth, which is pretty limited in its capabilities. I just use it for tracking for where I do invasive treatments and various other things. Like, it works for me, but it is limited. So, and that is, the future is definitely in GIS. But just learning to work with a lot of different organizations to accomplish a similar goal. I think, with this job and with other jobs, I've had to partner with a number of agencies or nonprofits where you try to achieve the same goal. For example, I did a project my first year here with a Natural Resource Conservation Service that involved setting up fencing and riparian corridors to keep cattle out of the streams, to protect the stream banks and to keep the riparian areas from eroding away. And we accomplished a pretty similar goal there. And I'm continuing to work with the Virginia Department of Forestry on a emerald ash borer program where we treat ash trees that are still alive to keep them alive, to kind of preserve the genetics of the local area. So we're trying to keep about 25 to 30 white ash trees on this property alive by injecting them with an insecticide every other year. And we work with the Department of Forestry to accomplish this. What?
That tree is a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's keeping it alive. And we had some pretty good success with it. And we're even going to be featured by the Department of Forestry as their star participant. So, as you can see here, a treated tree versus a non-treated tree, it's a pretty drastic difference. But yeah, just being able to, try out, if you want to be a land manager, you got to have experience in a lot of things. I came into this position with a great deal of experience with sustainable trail design and construction and a decent amount of experience with invasive species management, but almost zero experience with warm season grass and wildflower meadow management. So that's something I've had to learn on the fly. I've had to learn a whole.
I mean, you're probably a better beekeeper than me at this point.
Yeah, I love beekeeping.
Yeah.
So, and I've worked all over the country. I've had to reacquaint myself with different ecosystems and different plant guilds all across the country. And, it definitely seemed harder on the East Coast for some reason. There's a lot more diversity out here. Out West, it's way easier. But
yes, I mean, you've worked in Idaho, Alaska, the Southwest. I mean, you've been all over the country, right?
Yeah, Colorado, Hawaii, Virginia. But yeah, keep your options open. Get certifications; they're always great. Wilderness first responder certifications always look good. I got a burn manager certification, pesticide certification. Getting all of these certifications always look great on your resume, and they kind of expand your knowledge of general land management. But if you want to focus on a very specific thing, that I don't see any problem in that either, I guess.
Yeah. So those are great professional things. Is there anything, I try and tell the students always leverage every skill you've got when you
right.
are looking for a job, not just what you learned in school, are there things you kind of learned in life? Like, I don't know, you're always like fixing your own car and building stuff when we were in school. So are there skills you picked up just being a person that have helped you?
Um, I guess so. Again, I think it's learning. Like I came into this job having to have to be flexible with the landowner. You know, it's their objectives I'm trying to accomplish and not mine. So I have to offer my insight and advice when talking to the landowner, but it's ultimately their decision. And, you know, I'm not, yeah, it's just learning how to talk and communicate professionally with people and being able to offer up ideas and concede something that you're passionate about just because it might not align with your boss, I guess. Not getting emotionally attached to things, I
True.
guess.
Yeah, I can think of a few things.
Right. But you know, there are. I think you know your last question was going to be pros and cons, or I just wanted to make sure to get to
Sure,
that
yeah.
one
Yeah, we
of this
practice this
position.
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the pros to my current position is I run a one person program, conservation program. I'm a conservation manager. I have no subordinates. I occasionally have interns that work for me, but not so much anymore. Uh, so I have to do everything by myself, which is good because I can make up my own schedule. I have ultimate control over the timeline of my projects and design of my projects and how I implement them. You know, I often have little guidance from the landowner on what he wants to accomplish. So I offer up ideas on what we can do. Um, so it's pretty fun. I mean, I can just make this program whatever I want. If there's something I want to do, I design a project and I present it to the landowner, and it's either a yay or a nay, or maybe we tweak it a little bit. And you know, I have a pretty broad spectrum approach to this whole thing, so it's pretty cool. But at the same time, it can get frustrating. Sometimes I can have decision paralysis when it comes to what do I work on next. I have a whole list of projects, and they aren't necessarily time sensitive. And for some reason, sometimes I get stuck trying just to decide what to do. But obviously, the most difficult part about this job is working alone and not having a crew or a supervisor or subordinates to really bounce ideas off of, or to motivate you during the workday. That can be difficult sometimes.
I went a little nuts.
Yeah, it can be tough. Luckily, I'm someone who likes to work alone, so I've dealt with it pretty well. But there are times where it's when you, especially have a really big project that you're working on, and you've been working on it for days, and it's just it's only 5% done or 10% done. You're like, oh, this is gonna take me forever. I wish I had a crew here to help me, and you just gotta put your head down and keep going.
That's a good point though, because and that's one of the cons of this too. Like in land
Oh yeah,
management, every situation is different. You could be working for a private landowner, a government agency, a company, and everyone will have different objectives and different ways of getting things done. Even though some things have standards, but one landowner, like the landowner of this property, is a wonderful guy who wants to protect nature as his primary goal. Other
right.
landowners want like something pretty as their primary goal. And that could be challenging when it's not the right thing to do for biodiversity. You work alone on a 400 plus acre property, and you manage other properties for this landowner too. Um,
Right.
I've visited other properties that are a third of this size, and they have 30 or 40 employees as their land management staff. Totally different situation.
Right. Yeah. Not here.
Nope.
But I think it's appropriate though. Like I may complain from time to time that I could use help, but I do think it's appropriate for and I also think it's replicable, I guess. There might be landowners who have a 500-acre property who do have the resources to hire a manager like myself or like you were here. So I don't know. I think it's part of what we're doing here is trying to, I mean, the landowner here probably wouldn't admit this, but we're trying to kind of create a replicable model, I think, that can be used on other properties, specifically in coordination with the farm and the ag production. And you know, if you can have the success of the farm, I guess have the revenue generated from the farm to pay for the farm employees, pay for the land management, and pay for my position, you know, that's a win, I guess.
Yeah, so would you say, maybe to kind of close things off, there is no guide for land management. There's a guide to the skills you will frequently use in land management, but every situation is different. Every property is different. Every property's use combination is different. So I would say, you know, Mike is a great example of, don't approach trying to get a land management job as like, okay, tell me what to do. A lot of it is you have to understand a landscape and you have to help guide a landowner on how to do these things. So really make these tasks your own. Don't expect to be given a cookie cutter guide.
Right. It's not easy. You have to offer up ideas. I mean, I like pitching different ideas to the landowner. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I got, man.
No, that was good. I can't believe we didn't screw up somehow. There's still
Right.
time, I guess.
How much are you going to edit out?
Everything.
Great.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for taking time out of your day, and I'm glad I got to see Chunks the kitty.
Yeah. Say hi, Junkers.
Yep. Well, Mike Dilello, everyone, who went to ESF and is now a land manager among many other things. I hope we can, let's do one of these. We'll jam. I'll get my flute. You got your bass. Well,
Yeah, sometime. Yeah.
all right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike. Let's end
Bye,
this.
everyone.